Tonight, scrubbed. Boeing's first astronaut flight is called off minutes from liftoff.
Hold.
The company's Starliner spacecraft grounded on the launch pad again.
I'm Manuel Bojorquez at Kennedy Space Center with more on the problem that prompted that last-minute decision and when they may try again.
Also tonight, Israelis demand a hostage deal with Hamas as Benjamin Netanyahu rejects a peace plan for Gaza. Trump supporters take to social media to share their displeasure after his conviction. We head to a key battleground state for reaction.
I'm Nicole Killian in Allentown, Pennsylvania, with swing voters' take on the Trump verdict. Could it change minds in the race for the White House?
Judgment Day. Doomsday author Chad Daybell is sentenced to death in Idaho for killing his first wife and his then-girlfriend's 2 children. Severe storms, heavy rain, damaging winds set to impact the west and south. We'll track it. Heroes welcome. 80 years after D-Day, these Americans return to France to revisit the site of their greatest glory. And later, outlaw otter. She's back after evading capture in California. Keep an eye on your surfboard.
This is the CBS Weekend News from Washington with Adriana Diaz.
Good evening, everyone. Adriana is off. I'm Nancy Cordes. We're following several developing stories tonight, including severe storms threatening several states this first weekend of June, including the Pacific Northwest. But we're going to begin with a new setback for the American aviation giant Boeing. Today, the launch of its Starliner spacecraft with astronauts on board was called off less than 4 minutes before liftoff. They're going to try again on Wednesday. CBS's Manuel Bojorquez is at the Kennedy Space Center. Manny, what happened?
Nancy, good evening. And that latest setback happened, which is 3 minutes and 50 seconds to go before launch, when a computer system that is linked to the rocket and is supposed to take over in those final minutes issued an automatic hold. Boeing, NASA, and the maker of the rocket, ULA, are working to find out exactly why that computer system did not fully activate at the right time. The 2 astronauts aboard the Starliner, Commander Butch Wilmore and pilot Sonny Williams, exited the capsule about an hour after the scrub. Boeing was hoping today's launch would have transported them to the International Space Station, making it the second private company able to do that after SpaceX. But Starliner has faced years of setbacks, an attempted launch last month that was called off due to technical issues, and now today's scrub. Both astronauts have said they are willing to wait until all systems are a go for a launch, but they have been in quarantine now for more than a month preparing for this launch. And Nancy, now yet another delay.
Well, hopefully they'll have better luck on Wednesday. Manuel Bojorquez, thanks so much. Tonight, severe storms and possible flash flooding are threatening several states. Take a look at Dallas. The city was hit again today by storms and lightning strikes. Tornadoes are also in the forecast. Meteorologist Molly McCollum from our partners at the Weather Channel is tracking all of it. Hi, Molly.
Nancy, good evening. Let's go west to east following the weekend weather. Starting in the Pacific Northwest, it's a soggy pattern that's more reminiscent of January rather than June, as we're watching multiple waves of rain move in now all the way through Monday, and they'll add up to about 3 to 5 inches of rain in western Washington state. Multiple rounds of rain and storms are also expected in the northern and central plains, where large destructive hail as well as high winds are the main concerns. But we also have the threat for tornadoes. Flash flooding will also be top of mind, especially in areas that see repeated heavy downpours, and that will be many of us. And today, June 1st, is the first official day of Atlantic hurricane season. All agencies are forecasting a hyperactive season, including the Weather Channel. So why are experts sounding the alarm early? We have a developing La Nina combined with well above average water temperatures, and that, Nancy, is a recipe for a dangerous season ahead.
Hyperactive. That does not sound good. Molly McCollum, thanks so much. Today, the Coast Guard came to the rescue of a boat that capsized 36 miles off of Florida's southwest coast. On board, 7 adults and a child. All of them were airlifted to safety. The Coast Guard said they were found in the water wearing life jackets and holding on to a cooler. To Israel now. Tonight, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is warning that there will be no permanent end to the war in Gaza unless all of the hostages are released and Hamas is out of power. His statement follows President Biden's announcement that Israel had issued a new proposal aimed at reaching a ceasefire. CBS's Imtiaz Tayeb is in Tel Aviv with the latest. Good evening, Imtiaz.
Good evening. Well, following President Biden's announcement of the Israeli deal, Prime Minister Netanyahu insisted that the war would not end until Israel's objectives were achieved. Now, that includes the return of all hostages and the elimination of Hamas's military and governing capabilities.
Israelis took to the streets of Tel Aviv in their thousands, demanding Prime Minister Netanyahu not back away from his own government's proposal for a ceasefire and a return of the hostages.
President Biden, please help us, save them.
In a statement, Hamas said it was ready to engage positively with the three-phase proposal, but only if Israel clearly announces commitment to such a deal. CBS News asked Palestinians in Gaza what they thought about the potential agreement. We are hoping there will be action this time, and not just talk, said Ayad Daoul. This speech by the American president gave us hope, said Abdul Hadi Farhan, hope to return to our homes. After nearly 8 months of devastating violence, over 2 million Palestinians, almost all of Gaza's population, has been displaced. And Israeli forces now in the heart of the southern city of Rafah. Sam Rose speaks for the UN's Agency for Palestinians, UNRWA.
What is it like where you are in Rafah right now?
It's deeply troubling. It's deeply upsetting. Personally, it leaves me quite sick and quite fearful. The uncertainty, the senselessness and the helplessness of all of this, and really not knowing not just knowing what may come next, but that what comes next is by no means going to be the end to any of this.
And Israel's opposition leader Yair Lapid has called on the Netanyahu government to take the deal, Nancy, promising yet again to join his coalition if the far-right extremist parties do withdraw their support.
Breakthrough is so elusive. Imtiaz Tayeb, thanks. Today, a seismic moment in South Africa's election. The ruling African National Congress, the ANC, once led by Nelson Mandela, has lost its majority for the first time since the apartheid era ended 3 decades ago. Polls show voters are angry over widespread poverty and soaring unemployment. Former President Donald Trump's historic guilty verdict in New York this week is throwing the presidential election into uncharted territory. CBS's Natalie Brand is in Washington tonight with the latest. Natalie, good evening.
Good evening, Nancy. And both the Biden and Trump campaigns are fundraising off this week's historic guilty conviction. The Trump campaign claiming it's raised nearly $53 million since the verdict, and the former president also claiming the conviction will help him ahead of November. President Biden in Rehoboth Beach this weekend steered clear of politics Saturday, but didn't hold back Friday.
And it's reckless. It's dangerous. It's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict.
Responding to Trump's rambling remarks,
we're living in a fascist state.
And false claims following his conviction in New York's so-called hush money trial.
They are in total conjunction with the White House and the DOJ, just so you understand.
Upside-down flags, a symbol of protest adopted by the MAGA movement, on display outside Trump Tower and posted on social media, including by country singer Jason Aldean and the Conservative Heritage Foundation. Divisions are also widening on Capitol Hill.
This is weaponization and lawfare at its peak.
This was our tried and true criminal justice system playing out.
And Trump congressional ally and House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan has already written a letter calling on Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg to testify on Capitol Hill later this month, Nancy.
Natalie Brand, thanks so much. Voters have a lot to say about Trump's latest legal troubles. CBS News' Nicole Killian reports from the battleground state of Pennsylvania.
At this barbershop, clear-cut support for now convicted former President Trump.
A lot of people still stand by Trump.
Why do you think someone who is a convicted felon deserves to be president?
I don't think he is. I just figure it's another thing he has to go through.
But in Pennsylvania's third largest city of Allentown, the historic charges give some voters pause.
An appeal is not going to come until after an election, and we'll just have to see whether that invigorates a Republican base.
Allentown sits in the heart of the Lehigh Valley, which is now home to an increasingly diverse population. This region went for President Biden in 2020 and helped propel him to victory in the state. A CBS News battleground tracker in Pennsylvania conducted before the verdict showed the former president up by a point over President Biden.
My support is going to go for Biden and all the way.
I don't know yet. I'm indecisive on who I'm going to support.
I like some things that Biden does, but some of the things I'm not sure about. But between him and Trump, if Trump has been found guilty and he's done wrong thing, that we don't know who to pick.
Both candidates campaigned in the area this year. Glenn Stetler attended Trump's rally right before the trial and said the focus should be on the issues, not the verdict.
Look at the price of milk, $5, $6 for a gallon. My grandfather's rolling in his grave. It's a shame what our country has come to.
Do you think former President Trump can still win this election?
I believe so, without a doubt. I don't believe they'll jail him, but he's been tarnished, his name. He's now got a charge against his name for the rest of his life.
Signs to consider in a swing state that could decide the 2024 election. Nicole Killian, CBS News, Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Today, a judge in Boise, Idaho, sentenced author Chad Daybell to death. A jury recommended the death penalty 2 days after finding the 55-year-old guilty of first-degree murder and other charges in the 2019 killings of his first wife and 2 of his current wife's children. The couple's extreme doomsday religious beliefs drew attention to this case. Idaho law allows for execution by lethal injection or firing squad. Straight ahead on the CBS Weekend News, members of the greatest generation arrive in France to mark 80 years since the D-Day invasion. Why it's now a fight to remember. In Colorado, turns out some of the state's highest peaks are a bit shorter than we thought. A hero's welcome today in Paris as American veterans arrived in France to take part in ceremonies marking 80 years since the D-Day invasion. More than 16 million Americans served in the Second World War, and now only about 100,000 are still with us. The challenge is teaching their stories to a new generation. Here's Barry Peterson.
There are no D-Day stories easy to hear.
Clarence Robeson was staggering by me without his helmet, gaping hole in the left side of his forehead. His blonde hair was streaked with blood.
Harold Baumgarten was in the first wave.
They got machine gunned in the water. So we were losing men right and left. The water was full of blood.
Memories preserved at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. Steve Ellis served on an invasion landing craft in the Pacific and shared his story with seniors from Holy Cross High School.
That first time in combat, do you remember being nervous, or do you feel like your training had prepared you for that moment, or what were your feelings going into that?
For me, and I think most of my contemporaries, when we were in combat, no nerves at all, just doing your job.
Does anyone remember how they were made?
Michael Arvidas teaches them about the war.
I think that story is vital for them in the future, in a world that is ever changing, that has threats that are new and some threats that are old.
To reach younger generations, the museum sends course programs to schools around the country and has immersive exhibits like this one on the war in the Pacific.
This is a C-47. It was a plane like this that my father, Kermit, flew in World War II, dropping paratroops over enemy lines. I want people to remember his and other stories because it's been a long time. Younger generations may not know. My grandchildren will never know my father. He'll always only ever be a picture in a frame.
Because if new generations don't know what these men and women did and suffered and died for, my father and all the others may one day be forgotten. Barry Peterson, CBS News, New Orleans.
Such important lessons. Still ahead on the CBS Weekend News, inch by inch, new technology is changing the way we measure Colorado's mountains. We'll be right back. Colorado claims to have more mountains over 14,000 feet than any other state. But a new study finds Colorado's 14ers, as they're known, are a bit shorter than we thought. In tonight's Weekend Journal, CBS's Sean Boyd in Boulder reports the findings may have implications that go far beyond inches and feet.
Born and raised in Colorado, I've done more than half of the 14ers.
When NOAA physicist Derek Van Westrom was tapped to lead an overhaul of the National Spatial Reference System, recalculating the elevation of Colorado's 14ers, he says, was a bonus. They needed a place to test the new system, and Colorado had the terrain they were looking for.
We have, of course, people know it's more land above 10,000 feet than all the other states combined. It's a very high state. It's a very rugged state. So if the system works here, we know that it'll work anywhere else in the U.S.
Initial projections showed the shortest 14er, Sunshine Peak, might actually be a 13er.
We are now confident that it's 14,005.
Making Sunshine 6 inches taller than Huron Peak, which is now the shortest summit. While the ranking from tallest to shortest changed for several peaks, Van Westrom says Colorado didn't lose or gain any 14ers. As for the new measurement system, it aced the test, and that has implications for far more than 14er status. The project involved recalculating sea level.
Sea level isn't ever exactly level. Right. So if you can map out what that surface is, that's the new zero for all of the heights that we're going to do for the entire nation.
As part of the new calculation, NOAA measured gravity across the entire United States.
We would fly these grids with basically 6-mile spacing. Took 15 years to fly the entire nation. That tells us what the actual gravity is.
Using that and sophisticated GPS, scientists say they can now calculate heights to within a couple inches anywhere in the U.S., including Colorado's highest peaks.
It's fun for the hikers. It's important for the rest of the nation, but it's, scientifically we can prove that, yep, the new system works and it's going to be useful for everybody.
Sean Boyd, CBS News, Boulder.
Next on the CBS Weekend News, a major southern city's downtown is under a boil water advisory tonight. A lot of Atlanta is under a boil water advisory as crews work to repair a pair of major water main breaks. The breaks happened in 2 large feeder pipes that service much of the city's downtown. Officials say those breaks are not connected. Investigators now think they know what caused a deadly explosion in Youngstown, Ohio this week. They say workers cut through a gas line they thought had been turned off. The explosion killed 1 person and injured 7 more. NTSB board member Tom Chapman says the workers were clearing out piping and other old infrastructure from the basement of that building. When we return, an outlaw otter returns to the waters off Santa Cruz. Will she evade capture again? Finally tonight, California's beloved surfboard-stealing otter is back. The fearless female was spotted hanging in Santa Cruz. CBS's Carter Evans hit the water to look for the otter.
These are the latest mugshots of Otter 841, America's most wanted marine mammal. Last summer, she terrorized surfers in Santa Cruz, California, biting boards, even hijacking them. Now she's back, and surfers are on the lookout.
Are people excited to see this otter?
I think they're excited to see it first, and then they kind of get scared.
In an effort to do a deep dive, we hit the water.
She's been sighted at surf spots like this, but so far, no outlaw otters.
When I saw her, she was just feeding, real close to the cliffs.
Photographer Mark Woodward snapped the latest pictures of 841, the number on her tag, over the Memorial Day weekend.
And she was being very respectful of the surfers.
He also captured the images of otter mania that went viral last year when crowds tried to get too close.
So with paddleboarders and kayakers going right through the middle of kelp beds where sea otters sleep. It's dangerous. It's also illegal.
Concerned someone could get hurt, the Department of Fish and Wildlife set up a dragnet operation. It failed every time. Eventually, the ornery otter disappeared, but in October made a surprising return with her pup. Experts now think pregnancy may explain her aggressive behavior.
What would you like to see happen here?
I hope she could be left alone. She lives her best life. Hopefully, she will refrain from getting on the boards, but who knows?
We may just find out the next time the otter pops back up. Carter Evans, CBS News, Santa Cruz.
And that's the CBS Weekend News for this Saturday. I'm Nancy Cordes in Washington. Good night.